Robert actually Robert actually found this speaker and recommended her, and I'm just really happy to have her here today. And so, without further ado, I'd like to introduce Vicki, and it's all yours.
Thanks, Bridget. I told Bridget this morning, you guys, Vicki Alcoholic here. Anyway, I told Bridget that I sometimes have trouble with my internet, and it's really been giving me trouble the last few times I've been on a Zoom meeting. So I told her if I start to, if I start freezing up or if I start fading out, she has my permission to thank me for sharing and then introduce the topic. And I am so glad to be here this morning, and thank you so much for inviting me. And I recognize some of you from the Saturday and Sunday meeting, which is when I go to the SRG meetings. I am 75 years old, and I will be 41 years sober at the end of October. So there is a lot of story to tell, and I'm not going to try to tell it all at all. I thought maybe what I would do is just sort of try to talk a little bit around a topic. And I thought that a good topic for me this morning would be to remember and tell you about my first drink and my last drink, and kind of tell my story around that and not trying to make it too long. So, all right, I'm going to start telling you about my first drink. And I'll just start by saying that I know a lot of people start their story with their childhood. And though I had a challenging childhood, my mother was bipolar. And my dad was afraid of her because she was like, I always, when I describe my family life, it was like, Leave It to Beaver from Hell, where June Cleaver went around, looking in the cabinets for the FBI, but everything else was perfect. There was a home cooked meal every night and she kept the house clean. So it was weird, but I've worked through a lot of the trauma that came from that. And I believe that I started drinking because I was very reserved and socially awkward. From the time I was in junior high school, and I wanted to be part of, right? And I just couldn't make myself let go and be, have the kind of fun everybody was having. I was very stiff and kind of felt a little bit invisible. And by the time I got to high school, I was watching out for who was having fun. And it seemed like it was the girls that were just really kind of wild. And these are the ones that I was drawn to, and they were drinking and they were, kind of having crazy fun. And I thought, by the time I got to college, I thought, I'm going to try this drinking thing. Maybe that'll help me, let loose a little bit. And so I was 18. And prior to that, I was a very good girl, by the way. I was raised in the Deep South, and I had impeccable manners, and I was a very good girl. And so I'm starting college, and I thought I'll drink and I'll get, a little bit loose and have a little bit more fun than I usually do when I go to parties. And I joined a sorority. So I knew I was going to be going to fraternity parties. And my first drink was, I drank some slow gin and 7-Up before a fraternity party with some girlfriends, some sorority sisters. And I was drunker than hell on one drink, but of course, then I went on to drink the next one, another one, and another one. So by the time I got to the party, I was and I'd never had a drink before. So I was just totally, bonkers. By the time I got there, I threw up. I threw up a lot of pink stuff all over the place because of what I had to drink. I threw up at the party. And then I found myself upstairs, and coming down, I fell down the stairs. They had to carry me out of that party. That was my introduction to drinking. And I decided that worked really well. That was like, that really helped. And that was going to be my, the way that I was going to do it. I would maybe drink a little less, so I didn't really throw up, but I didn't take the clue that, I should be humiliated or anything. I just knew that people were talking about me, and that was a good thing. And so my reputation as a party girl progressed through college. I had a blast, let me tell you. I lived in the sorority house, and I kept drinking after, I graduated and I got married and had a baby, and I kept drinking, but I wasn't the party girl for the first 3 years of my daughter's life. But I did sit in the rocking chair with her every night and drink wine. I had wine and rocking and wine, and my husband was off working at a local upscale restaurant at night as a waiter. Anyway, so I didn't, so I kept drinking. And then when I got divorced, I went back to being a party girl, and I started entertaining at home. I took good care of my daughter. She thinks I was a good mom. I tried to keep her from too much of my craziness. But anyway, at one point I was working, I thought it was kind of a great life. I drove a yellow sports car. I had all these boyfriends. I had this really glamorous job at a really classy interior design firm. And I partied like crazy every night. And sooner or later, it got to the point where it was sort of like when I'd come home from the parties, I would feel really, empty. Like, where was everybody? I'd come home and it'd be just me and my daughter. And I'd deflate like a balloon. I'd be like all full of, hot air at the party. And then I'd come home and then it got to where I wasn't making it into work on time. And I would come in with these hideous hangovers. And finally, a friend of mine grabbed me and said, not you should go to AA, but you should come to church with me. And I had my first and only religious experience, not spiritual, religious. And I was converted to Christianity. I became this, really not fanatic, or maybe I wouldn't call myself a fanatic, but I was like this religious person. And I kept drinking. But, it didn't seem right, because what I was hearing at church was, the kind of life I should be living was not the kind of life I was living. My life was kind of decadent. So anyway, first thing I decided to do was stop sleeping around. And for some reason that was easier for me than not drinking. So I stopped doing because it's a revolving door for my daughter. So I let go of that. And then it was time to let go of drinking, and I couldn't. I couldn't stop drinking, and I tried everything. I remember I tried at one point, I thought, I'm going to eat M&Ms. And every time I want to drink, I'm going to get out a bag of M&Ms. So I was eating pounds of M&Ms, and I was buying them by the pound. I thought, well, okay, instead of going to the liquor store after work, I'm going to go to the gym. Yeah. So I'd go to the gym and then I'd come home and drink. So, I wasn't able to stop drinking, and it was really scaring me because it felt like maybe I was an alcoholic. And I went to church one morning. I always went hungover and sat in the back row. And one morning I went and I heard this pastor at the church say, if you have a problem with drinking or drugs, there's this guy here, this counselor here who can help you. So I heard that. And, a few weeks later, when I didn't make it into work again, I called him up. It was Pastor Fred. And he said, Vicki, I'm going to take you somewhere tonight, and you're going to get well. You're going to get well. And so I didn't know where he was going to take me. I was excited because I thought, well, maybe I'll be able to stop drinking, but I was scared because I didn't know where he was going to take me. So he took me to my first AA meeting. Pastor Fred walked me through the door of my first AA meeting, and here I was in this church where people were witnessing at the front. I thought, I'm in the right place, man. This is where I'm supposed to be. And that started my AA program. And I felt like I really fit in because the God I had at the time really aligned with the God that was in the AA Big Book, right? You prayed to this God, and you talked to this God, and you did this and you did that. And this was the creator of the universe. And all of that was right there in the Big Book. And so I really felt like I was in the right place. And I started to get so much better. Something that I would be ashamed of. I started going outdoors adventures with people who like to hike and canoe and I kayak and do stuff like that. I started doing that. I went back to school and got my graduate degree. I wrote 3 books and published them. I didn't publish them myself. I actually had a publisher who sent me cross country to Canada and the US. And I had all this really neat stuff going on. And I became really active in this church I was in. And I took on a leadership position there. And at about 10 years of sobriety, there was this scandal that rocked the church. And it affected me. I wasn't part of the scandal, but it affected me and the whole community and the whole church. And it just set me back on my heels. What happened? I'm not going to talk about it, but it was, did that. I had turned well in my life over to, I didn't know who, what was, I had just sort of trusted that the people that led me to this place were people that knew what was going on, and I just let them figure it out. I didn't do my own research. So I started doing my own research. I started reading other books about other religions, and I started reading the sacred text of other religions, and I started going to churches that were outside of my religion, that were where the religions were represented in my community. Started going to those churches and temples, and I started really opening up to a whole different thought about my worldview, and what it meant to have a higher power. That night, he took me at night, and I had my last drink that morning. And so from then on was my AA program, and I was struggling with the higher power part of it 10 years in, after I'd done inventories and done all the steps and had a sponsor and all of that. But I was really choking up when it came to, this higher power stuff. And I found a meditation practice called mindfulness meditation. I looked at the Buddhist religion. I didn't care for, none of the religions that I looked at and studied none of them had stories that I could fully embrace. I could embrace parts of it. And that was okay. I finally realized doing this new meditation practice that I had found, I finally realized that I didn't have to have a story. I didn't have to have a religion. I didn't have to have anything. All I had to have was a knowing inside that there was something higher than me, and I didn't know what it was. That's all I had to know, is that I didn't know. And so I started calling whatever that was the great mystery, but certainly I didn't talk to it, pray to it, try to figure it out. It just was there whenever it was there. And it was a beautiful thing, let me tell you. It was something I'd never experienced before. It was so much better than getting drunk. It was so much better than getting high. It was just such a peaceful, wonderful thing that when I would meditate, it would be there, whatever it was. And so I started feeling really awkward in AA meetings, because I just, like I said, I felt like I was going to the same movie every, 3 or 4 times a week. And so at some point, there's a group in Cottonwood called the Freethinkers. I just got a connection table, so let me know if I start to fade out. Anyway, let me finish up and just say I'm glad I found secular AA. I'm glad I'm here. I feel like I'm not going to the same movie every time I come to an AA meeting. I hear something different, and it goes along with what I believe about higher power. And so that's all I have to say about me and my 75 years of life and 41 years of being sober. And I just will, say, if you want to talk about your first drink or your last drink or whatever you want to tell us about, that's what I'd like to hear about this morning. And thank you so much again for inviting me.
Thank you, Vicki.